Should governments ban all religious cults? Wait a minute, don't go yet. When people hear this question, should religious cults be banned and made illegal by governments? A common response is no, because it would be taking away religious freedoms and giving the government unwanted control over more and more of our freedoms. However, I believe there is an extremely significant factor that has to be considered, and that would ban and criminalise certain cults. And in this video, I shall put out this proposal for you to give your feedback on, and if possible, try to shoot my proposal down in flames if you can. If you like it and think it's ready to go, I'll send it to my MP, at least. In case you haven't time to listen to the whole video, here's the summary. I believe in freedom of religion. Yes, freedom to believe what you want, but, and here's the big but, I don't believe in freedom to divide and destroy families and freedom to incite hatred and discrimination using the freedom of religion to do such things. That's what I'm addressing and exploring here. I wrote this proposal in full in the book Cult Escape, My Story, which you can access, by the way, free on YouTube or on Amazon Unlimited. It's the penultimate chapter to attempt to address and answer this serious question. What can be done about religious cults that are destroying families? Anything or nothing? Let's go. First of all, some context. Imagine your son or daughter is suddenly separated from you, their father and mother. Or you are suddenly separated from your parents and family. What was once a happy family living together, sharing life with each other, there for each other, who has always celebrated special occasions and all the important events in life together, comes to an abrupt end. Your family is now separated. This separation could last for months, years, or even for life. You don't know. As the reality of this terror sinks in, you feel like a dagger has severed your heart in two. Instead of familiar smiles and hugs from children, parents, siblings, etc., an icy shield has now come down. There is now an emotional disconnect, a feeling of loss and the heavy heart that a bereavement brings. What was once happiness and acceptance has suddenly turned to suspicion, awkwardness, and condemnation. You are being judged as evil. You have been cut off from your family and are now shunned. No more eating together, no more living in the same house, no more holidays, birthdays, or weddings, or funeral invites. Something has had a powerful influence over your once happy family. What is that powerful influence? Keep listening. These separations cause great suffering. When an infant is separated from its mother for whatever reason, as the awful reality sinks in that the relationship is no longer there, that child can experience great anguish. That child may scream with the pain and the loss of its mother. Well, adults that are cut off from their loved ones, I can tell you firsthand, feel the pain too. They just suffer, many of them in silence. I was one of those people. I have often wondered, should there not be governmental protection? May I ask you a question? What should we do when something is socially unacceptable yet it is legal? I did a survey on LinkedIn to find out the public perception of cultic separation. The question I asked was, in your view, how acceptable and right is it for families to be separated by cult law? The following are all the comments, the 12 of the comments by people that answered the question. All were asked if they wanted their names or initials included. Some wanted to remain anonymous for good reason. See if you agree with any of these. There's 32 in the book. I'll just read out 8 of them. The first one, number 1, family are the most important support network you can have. Unless your entire family are abusers, cutting all contact seems to me abusive and constitute cruel and unusual treatment. I don't know how I would have coped without siblings and parents and grandparents. The next one, how acceptable? Completely and entirely unacceptable. Any religion that seeks to divide, control and manipulate its members and followers is a cult based on its own power and not the higher power or love of any god or the greater good. Separation of families, the next one said, like many other cultic behaviours, is a mechanism of control. Someone else said, I don't find that acceptable. Hearts must break constantly. I have watched a documentary on this and it is just so difficult to watch. Cults to me are control and power. The next one, I watched Leah Remini's documentary on it. Truly frightening how easy it is to con people with a vision. When you take a weak person and strip them back to nothing. The next one, it's wrong, John. This is where authorities should intervene because separating children from family members without good reason, e.g. if they've subjected them to assault or failed to protect them from harm, such as by allowing a violent person to live with them, amounts to emotional abuse. Those children grow up to be adults who have been conditioned to think they can't make their own choices, and the cycle continues. The next one, it makes my blood boil, John. I believe people should be able to do what they want as long as it does not impact on others. This behaviour is the total antithesis of my interpretation of humanity, enacted by ego-driven megalomaniacs. Someone else said, these so-called rules are not designed to consider the emotional needs or rights of members. They are abusive control strategies with far-reaching psychological implications. And they were just a sample of 8 of how people feel about religious groups that separate families by their cult law. While the sample size is small, I don't think it is unreasonable to conclude that most people generally find cultic separation totally unacceptable. Is this how you feel about it? Cultic law can influence families to separate from members who disobey them. These cultic laws are not implemented and enforced by the governments of where these people live. They are imposed by religious cults that have indoctrinated their followers and have got into their heads. Such is the power that some cults can have over their followers that parents and children will abandon each other. Husbands and wives will leave each other and families will separate. The power over people has even led some groups to commit mass suicide. I say this not to be dramatic, but because it has actually happened in the past. Could it happen in the future? But can anyone start a religious cult and start imposing their own laws on vulnerable followers? Yes. The right to do this is supported at the moment by the Human Rights Act 1998, in which there are the following 2 articles. Article 9, freedom of thought, conscience and religion. Everyone is free to hold a broad range of views, beliefs and thoughts, and to follow a religious faith. The right to manifest those beliefs may be limited only in specific circumstances. Article 10, freedom of expression. Everyone has the right to hold opinions and express their views on their own or in a group. This applies even if these views are unpopular or disturbing. This right can be restricted only in specified circumstances. If you read these 2 articles in full, you will notice that the words protection and rights are used many times. Because of the freedoms in the Human Rights Act, it is not illegal for anyone to start a religious cult and effectively control their followers, to give them money, adopt their peculiar belief system, die rather than take a blood transfusion. And if the rest of their followers' family do not also obey, then they may find that they end up being ostracized and split from them. This can result in a family destroyed by separation. Now, people have the freedom to join whatever group they want to. However, where is the protection for vulnerable people who are born into or are recruited into religious groups which results in their vulnerable family being split? Specifically, what are their rights? Is there something that can be done? Governments have the difficult job of striking a balance between being too restrictive, which can infringe on freedoms, and being too liberal, which can also infringe on freedoms. The purpose of government is to protect the individual rights of its citizens. This covers most departments of our life, including health and safety. When a government deems something to be a potential danger, it issues what are known as government health warnings. Such warnings are not always bans, but they are put in place to educate and to protect. This is what responsible government does, and it is what we expect and vote for them to do. I'm going to give you 3 precedents of this. Number 1, prevent is or was part of the government's counter-terrorism strategy. It draws attention to ideology that supports terrorism with a view to protecting vulnerable people. It highlights sectors and institutions where there are risks of radicalisation. Number 2, government believe it is necessary to enforce the publishing of health warnings on cigarette packets. They have not banned tobacco, but maybe it was enough destroyed lives that eventually motivated them to legislate a warning to all who smoke or who may be thinking of smoking. And the third precedent, the PPI scandal in principle, was that people were not informed about what they were paying for. When what was happening came to light, banks were told to pay back what was due, resulting in millions seeking compensation. To prevent this from happening in the future, the Financial Services Authorities brought in a new regime in 2011, which included customers having to be told in writing that PPI was an optional extra. I think it is imperative that there is consideration for new legislation in the UK that seeks to A, promote awareness, and B, to be a warning to all people about religious cults who have laws in place that result in the separation of families. Specifically, I'm referring to the separation that results in cult members not being allowed to have normal family life with non-members. And here is my definition of normal family life. Number 1, families are allowed and free to live together if desired. 2, families are allowed and free to visit each other in their homes and stay with each other. 3, families are allowed to freely celebrate the birth of their grandchildren and go to family weddings. 4, families are allowed to fully join in freely with the funeral arrangements of family members. 5, families are allowed to freely celebrate birthdays and special occasions. 6, families are allowed to eat or drink freely with each other anywhere. 7, families are allowed to freely go out shopping together. And 8, families are allowed to freely go on holidays together. With this in mind, I would like society and the government to consider the following. I would like to see religious groups that impose laws whereby members or followers cannot have or are unable to maintain this normal family life, having some form of religious transparency warning on all literature and as a readable sign on any buildings where they meet. I would also like to recommend that the first time anyone comes in contact with such a group, they must be read this warning in full and sign a document indicating that they have understood it. I would also like to see this applying to all existing members. The goal of the religious transparency warning is that the public will be better placed to be able to make informed decisions should they choose to join such religious groups that separate families, resulting in there being a protective measure in place for this socially unacceptable destruction of normal family life. Now, since I wrote this, a Jehovah's Witness congregation was taken to court and charged with inciting hatred and discrimination against those who had walked away from their religion. The person who brought the charge claimed that it wasn't just about their religious beliefs, it was that their faith teaches people that there's something inherently problematic with former members. All cults teach this. He said that once a member had left the group, they were disowned and completely isolated socially by order of the organisation. Again, a hallmark of cults. Cults use different language in their incitement. It was reported during this case that the Jehovah's Witnesses ex-members should be shunned like the plague. The cult I was born into were told by their leader that they should utterly hate the world. Over 70% of their members are in destroyed families, as I discovered when I did one particular survey. Well, the verdict was that the court found the Jehovah's Witnesses guilty as charged and fined them €96,000. The wheels are turning. Society is starting to speak out. What are your views? Should there be a religious transparency warning on all religious groups that divide and destroy families? Should it be illegal?